Hey guys, tonight we open a sliding wooden door and step into the quiet hum of a samurai's personal space. Not a dojo, not a battlefield, but the most sacred territory of all, their closet. That may not sound like the start of an epic journey, but trust me, once you see what's inside, you'll understand why even the tiniest drawer here could hold more drama than a sword fight in the rain. You're not just standing in a dusty storage room. You're surrounded by ritual, strategy, and identity, all folded into silk and steel. Right away, your eyes catch the glow of lacquered wood, the neat angles of folded cloth, and, oh yes, the armor. Polished to a mirror sheen perched on a specially carved wooden stand. It's not just functional gear, it's theater, it's legacy, it's your resume in plate form. Your task this evening is simple but not easy. You're going to take off your armor piece by piece and store it exactly the way it should be stored. No tossing it in a heap, no dangling cords. That's not just sloppy, it's disrespectful. You're being watched by tradition, by your ancestors, and very possibly by your grumpy house steward, who's always one rice grain away from lecturing you about rust. So you start with the the cuirass, the chest plate. You lift it off carefully and hang it on the main hook of the stand, shoulders facing forward. Not sideways, not crooked. Then comes the sword, the shoulder guards. Each one is unlatched with the kind of care you'd reserve for unwrapping a newborn puppy. You lay them flat beneath the cuirass, laces neatly bundled. Your fingers move automatically. It's a choreography you've practiced since youth. Armor isn't just battle gear. It's the ultimate flex. Each plate, rivet, and lacquered tie says something about who you are. Your clan, your rank, your wealth, even your artistic preferences. Historians still argue whether certain crest designs were primarily meant to intimidate enemies or impress dinner guests. Probably both. The high-date or thigh guards get unstrapped next. You sigh softly as they hit the rack, light relief from the weight, both literal and symbolic. Then the coat, the armored sleeves, which require a little wriggling to get off. You flex your fingers afterward, still attached. That's always good. Finally, the sunny shin guards come off with a satisfying click. You place them side by side at the base of the rack like loyal sentries awaiting their next command. A little triangle of order in a chaotic world, and now the helmet, the kabuto. You lift it slowly, reverently, not because it's heavy, though it is, but because it's, well, dramatic. The helmet is often the most personalized part of a samurai's outfit. Yours features a curved crescent crest, a nod to your grandfather's battlefield nickname, the Moon Who Cuts. You never quite lived up to it, but the helmet remembers. You place it on its dedicated lacquered stand, a mini throne really. It faces the door as if waiting to be summoned back into service. You step back and admire the full display. There's something oddly satisfying about it. The way the armor is presented upright and whole almost gives the impression it could move on its own, like an empty ghost still holding your shape. And you know what? You probably wouldn't be surprised if it did. As you tidy a stray lace, your foot brushes against the soft mat beneath the rack. It's not there for comfort. It's there to catch any falling fragments of dust, dirt, or heaven forbid, rust. Samurai closets are sacred spaces, but they're also maintenance zones. You keep a small cloth nearby, dampened just enough to wipe away sweat marks or bloodstains. Yes, even warriors get pit stains, especially warriors. You kneel, straighten your back, and bow once toward the armor before rising. Not because you're superstitious, just respectful. And maybe a little superstitious. The truth is, storing your armor is about more than tidiness. It's about narrative. This is how you end your day, not with a drink, not with a scroll, but by returning your second skin to its place. You hang up your courage, your discipline, your occasional panic. You admire it, then walk away. In modern terms, it's like having your resume, your dating profile, and your bank account all hanging on one hook. And you thought closet organizers were just for sock drawers. As the candlelight flickers across the curves of steel and silk, you feel it. A sense of pause, of transition. You're not the warrior now. You're the man behind him. And as you slide the closet doors shut, the armor remains exactly where it belongs, ready, waiting, and silent. The sliding door closes with a soft clack, and suddenly the air feels lighter, like you've just shed a second self. You roll your shoulders, grateful for the freedom, but also aware that your work isn't done. Because beyond the armor stand lies the true heart of the samurai closet, the textile drawers. You kneel before them like a priest at the altar, sliding open the first drawer to reveal your kimono collection. This isn't a jumbled heap of casual wear. No, these are arranged by formality, by season, and, because you're just a little obsessive, by emotional utility. You've got the indigo-dyed cotton kimono for everyday tasks, the formal black silk for ceremonies, the russet travel robe with hidden pockets, and yes, even the one with the crane pattern you swore you'd never wear again after the incident at the poetry recital. Each kimono is folded katazuke style, a system so precise that one crease out of place makes the whole drawer feel like it's judging you. You reach for tonight's robe, something breathable, not too flashy, with a hint of dignity. It's saffron-colored, trimmed with muted teal, calming but not boring. You slip into it, adjusting the collar until it hugs just below your jawline. It's not armor, but it's still a kind of shield. You pull open the next drawer, sashes. Obi in every width and texture. Some are plain cloth, others stiff as bark from all the starching. Tonight you go for a medium-width gray one. Neutral, polite, uncontroversial. You tie it with a quick twist and tuck, your hands moving with the practiced ease of someone who's done this more times than they've swung a sword. Because let's be real, getting dressed is a form of battle. Against time, against sloppiness, and against the creeping suspicion that you might have gained a little weight since spring. Beside the obi drawer is a small compartment filled with accessories. Kisaru pipes, folding fans, ink brushes, spare cords. You pause at the fan. It's ivory-handled, painted with a single peony in bloom. A gift from your teacher after you recited the tale of the Haika without tripping over a single syllable. You don't use it often, but it stays close like a paper trophy folded into memory. Now comes the trickiest part of the closet, the zabuton shelf. These sitting cushions are stacked neatly, but you know the top one always slides. You steady the pile and pull one free, laying it down behind you for a moment of rest. The cushions sighs under your weight, so do your knees. Around you, the closet whispers a kind of silent gratitude. Every item here has been chosen, cleaned, stored, and respected. Historians still argue whether samurai were genuinely minimalist or just really good at hiding clutter. Either way, this space reflects you. Orderly on the outside, a little chaotic inside the drawers. Your gaze shifts upward to the high shelf where your more personal belongings are kept. There's the box of correspondence, scrolls bound with faded cords containing letters you never quite finished reading. Some from fellow samurai, one from your mother, one from a woman who used to sign her name with a chrysanthemum drawn in the corner. You keep them for the ink, the memory, and the reminder that not everything written down must be acted on. Next to the box is your Netsuke collection. Tiny carved toggles, mostly made from wood or bone. Some are serious, depicting warriors or dragons. Others are deeply silly, like the one shaped like a sleeping cat curled around a gourd. That one makes you smile every time. Netsuke were originally meant to fasten things to your sash, but they've become your little companions. Tiny totems of humor in a world obsessed with dignity. And finally, there's the scent box. A lacquered square with perforated top, filled with KO, fragrant wood chips and herbs for burning. You slide it open and take a whiff. Warm cedar, crushed plum, a hint of old incense. It smells like memory, like rainy temples and quiet mornings. You close the lid slowly, sealing in the softness for another day. Down below, in a narrow drawer, are your writing tools. Brushes, inkstones, washi paper. You keep them next to a short stack of your own poems, folded and tied with a green ribbon. You're not a great poet, but you're not the worst. And besides, who's judging? You're a samurai. You're allowed to be bad at metaphors if you're good at dying with honor. You rise from the zabuton, retie your obi with a firmer knot, and slide the drawers shut one by one. The closet is whole again, restored, balanced. You linger a moment longer, letting the stillness settle. The samurai closet isn't just a storage space, it's an emotional map, a tactile biography. Every fold, every shelf, every scent tells a story about who you are when you're not being a warrior. You turn toward the doorway, sliding it open softly. Behind you, the armor waits, the robes breathe, and the Netsuke cat keeps sleeping. You step back into the hall, and the world beyond your closet greets you with the muted hush of tatami mats and the subtle creak of old wood. It's still early. The sun filters through the shoji screens in golden strips, warm but not yet intense. You pause to breathe it in, a quiet luxury most warriors overlook. But you're not heading to breakfast just yet. There's one more corner of your storage to tend to. The utility chest. It's not glamorous, no silk, no poetry. Just the stuff that keeps you functioning in the everyday chaos of samurai life. You crouch in front of it and lift the lid. Inside, nestled with almost monastic tidiness, are the tools of mundane survival. A bundle of straw sandals, waraji, fraying at the edges but still usable. You have indoor ones, outdoor ones, and the slightly thicker pair you wear on long marches, though, let's be honest, those haven't seen much marching since your 30s. Next to the sandals is a stack of cleaning cloths folded like they're auditioning for a parade. You pull one out, flick it open, and begin dusting the blade stand near the window. Not the blade, just the cake itself. The sword remains sheathed, untouched, respectful. Cleaning the display without unsheathing is an art of its own, a way of saying, I respect you, but I'm not picking a fight with dust. You pause by the rack and adjust the placement of your wakizashi ever so slightly. It's funny how these little rituals, realigning a short sword, smoothing a kimono sleeve, folding a cloth into quarters, give the day a rhythm that no battle ever could. Historians still argue whether the samurai code was more about violence or discipline. But here in your quiet hall, it's clearly about both. Back at the chest, you lift the tray and reveal a second layer. Grooming tools, a dull razor, a comb carved from bamboo, a small copper mirror more symbolic than functional. Samurai didn't primp per se, but they maintained themselves with deliberate care. You run your fingers through your hair, feeling where the top knot will need retightening later. It's part of the look, yes, but also the identity. You are what you tie each morning. Next to the grooming tools is a small pouch filled with dried pickled plums. Emergency rations, sure, but also your guilty pleasure. You pop one into your mouth and wince as the sour hits like a sword to the tongue. It's a wake-up call sharper than any tea. You chew thoughtfully, the flavor pulling you back to childhood, to a time when battles were just wooden practice swords and your biggest worry was whether your handwriting pleased the calligraphy teacher. Behind the pouch is a repair kit, needle, thread, wax twine, and a tiny jar of pine resin. Because life happens. Sashes snap, sandals fray. Occasionally something tears during a surprise duel or an over-enthusiastic tea ceremony. You've learned to fix what you can. Not because it's noble, but because tailors charge a fortune. You spot something else, a cloth-wrapped bundle tucked beneath the chest's corner. You know what it is before you even touch it. The spare hachimaki, headbands worn for both battle and effort. This one is dark indigo, stiff from old sweat and folded with care. You unfold it, smoothing the creases and hold it up to the light. The center bears a hand-drawn kanji. One you wrote years ago. Endure. You chuckle softly. At the time it felt profound. Now it feels like a note to your knees. You wrap the hachimaki and return it to its place. The lid of the chest closes with a satisfying thump. Utility. Preserved. You rise and stretch, your joints offering a chorus of polite objections. You listen, then ignore them. There's no meeting today, no ceremony, no call to arms, just chores. Maybe a sparring match if your friend from the next province drops by, and a midday nap if you're lucky. But even idle days demand dignity. You move to the corner of the room where the scent of incense still lingers. There's a box of senko, thin sticks of sandalwood, plum, and hinoki. You strike one, light it, and let the tip flare before settling into a slow, smoky burn. The smell fills the air, weaving into the fabric of the morning. You sit beside it, letting your breath sink with the rising tendrils. This isn't meditation exactly, more like defragmenting your inner hard drive. Samurai didn't talk about mindfulness, they lived it quietly in moments like these. A finger on a comb, a toe slipped into straw sandals, the precise flick of ash from incense. The body and spirit realigned without any fanfare. You think briefly of your closet again, the drawers, the armor, the fan with the peony, and feel a kind of kinship with the very idea of order, of keeping the world in check one folded robe at a time. Outside, a crow calls once, sharply. You glance toward the garden where sunlight glints off the stone path like a mirror of the sky. The day has begun, but your space, your little corner of rituals in cloth and creaking wood, remains untouched for now, waiting, ready, because the samurai may live for honor, but he thrives on habit. You walk toward the second storage alcove with the same care a painter approaches a blank canvas. This one is different from the elegant clothing chest or the utilitarian crate. It's a modest wooden cabinet, narrower than the others, its front covered by a pair of sliding doors painted with waves in fading blue ink. Here lie your seasonal items, garments, tools, and accessories rotated with the weather's mood swings. If your main closet is your armor and your utility chest your lifeline, this cabinet is your calendar. You slide the doors open with a whisper of wood on wood. Inside, everything is stacked with obsessive geometry. There are thin summer robes, hito, made from breathable hemp, folded so precisely you'd think they were pressed by monks. Next to them are thick winter socks, tabi lined with cotton, a pair of fingerless gloves, and a woolen shawl that's not technically regulation but has saved your ears more times than you'd admit in public. Historians still argue whether seasonal wear among samurai was purely functional or tied to ritual ideas about harmony with nature. You suspect it's both. You didn't spend half a childhood copying poetry about plum blossoms just to sweat in the wrong robe come June. You lift the winter box. Beneath the clothes are carefully wrapped bundles, old receipts from charcoal merchants, a spare hood, a cracked inkstone you keep meaning to throw away, and a pair of snow cleats that's strapped to your sandals. You haven't needed them in years, still they stay. A samurai never forgets the time he slipped on temple steps and took a monk down with him. You laugh quietly at the memory. The monk forgave you eventually. The bruise didn't. You set the box aside and inspect the summer items. It's not quite time to bring them out, but the warm breeze this morning has you thinking ahead. There's a short-sleeved yukata with a faint fish pattern stitched near the hem. You run your fingers over it, remembering the vendor who swore it would attract cool breezes. A lie, obviously, but a charming one. Beside the clothing are seasonal accessories. A wide straw hat, cracked but still wearable, and a collapsible paper fan that emits a little puff of lavender scent when flicked open. It was a gift. You can't remember from whom anymore. Perhaps a cousin, perhaps a festival booth prize. It doesn't matter. It stays because it makes summer slightly less unbearable. There's even a box of old festival tokens, wooden charms, braided cords, and a carved fox mask you once wore to a solstice parade. The nose is chipped, the paint faded, but you tuck it away with the reverence of someone who understands that past selves deserve their space too. At the back of the cabinet is your small stash of emergency gifts. Items to be offered on short notice when politeness demands it. Folded paper cranes, strips of calligraphy with vaguely wise phrases, and a little pouch of dried yuzu peel. It's the samurai's version of a birthday card drawer. You've used it twice and restocked it dutifully afterward. One item sits separate, a wrapped bundle of 5 letters tied in silk thread. You don't open them. You know exactly what they say. They're from an old friend, a fellow warrior who moved to the coast years ago. The letters are philosophical, slightly rambling, and full of bad haiku. They're terrible. You've read them a dozen times. You keep them because they remind you that life isn't just about form. It's also about folly. A samurai with no sense of humor is just a sword with legs. You close the cabinet and look around the room. Every item has a place, and every place a story. You know which sandals are for rain and which are for social visits. You know which robe signals mourning and which one says, yes, I am open to tea and subtle political conversation. Your closet is less a container than an extension of your personality. A second skin made of cotton, lacquer, and organized sentiment. You take a moment to adjust the drawer edges. One is slightly ajar, and you can't have that. Straightening it, you catch sight of your own reflection in the polished lacquer. You look tired. Not defeated, just lived in. You brush a stray hair back into place and nod once, as if acknowledging your own presence. Then you turn, step into your sandals, and exit the room. Outside, the courtyard hums softly. A gardener rakes gravel into careful spirals. A bird hops along the edge of a basin, pecking at invisible things. Someone down the hall sneezes and curses softly in Edo dialect. You pull your shawl tighter around your shoulders. The wind's picked up. You whisper a small promise to yourself, not grand or poetic. Just a reminder. Tonight, you'll reorganize the ink brush drawer. Maybe finally retire that cracked inkstone. Not because it's urgent, but because that's what a samurai does. You return indoors, the paper screen closing with the dry hush behind you. This time, you kneel before the smallest of your storage units. More a drawer than a chest built into the base of a larger cabinet. It's almost hidden, its handle a sliver of bone nestled flush against the wood. This drawer is your desk, your study, your moment of control over ink, paper, and all the tiny implements that define your daily writing rituals. You ease it open and the familiar scent wafts up. Aged cedar mingled with the faint sharpness of ink and the powdery ghost of incense long burned. Inside is an orchestra of order. Brushes arranged by thickness and firmness, their handles polished from use. Inkstones in descending size. Rolled scrolls tied in dyed cords. Sharpened charcoal sticks tucked into a bamboo sleeve like soldiers in formation. Historians still argue whether samurai placed more importance on martial skill or calligraphic mastery. You've always suspected the truth lies somewhere between, a balance of blade and brush, the outer cut and the inner stroke. The ink reveals the mind as surely as a duel exposes the body. You take out your favorite brush, short-handled, stiff-bristled with a crack near the ferrule that you keep binding with linen string. It's not the most elegant, but it suits you. Like a sword fitted to its wielder, the brush becomes an extension of your wrist, your pulse, your flaws. Next to the brushes lies your collection of seals, not grand, just modest wooden stamps carved with your name, your household symbol, and a small lotus flower you added when you were 16 and melodramatic. You don't use it anymore, but it stays. Memory is as valid a reason for space as utility. You unroll a practice sheet. rice paper lined faintly with guidelines, and inspect your last attempt. The kanji are serviceable, balanced, but lacking rhythm. Your strokes feel a little too sharp, a little too self-conscious. You set the page aside. A true samurai doesn't just master form, he forgets it at the right moment. Like forgetting the rules of a game you've memorized, just so you can finally win it. At the back of the drawer are 3 wrapped scrolls. One is a letter from your father. One is your own copy of the household code, Kakun, rewritten in your own hand when you came of age. And one, oddly enough, is a guide to herb-infused ink mixtures you bought from a traveling monk who claimed lavender ink could soothe rage. You tried it once. The only thing it soothed was your sleep. Mid-letter, you nodded off. Still, you keep the scroll. There's something poetic about ink that dreams for you. Tucked in the corner is a small cloth-bound bundle, your emergency writing kit. Inside is a miniature brush, a slab of ink, a folding board, and paper cut into small squares. It's for travel, or for moments when you absolutely must write something down, be it a poem, a farewell, or a carefully worded insult. Speaking of which, there's an envelope addressed but never sent. You remember writing it in a fury, then rereading it the next morning and quietly slipping it into the drawer. The intended recipient has likely forgotten the incident by now. You haven't, but time, unlike ink, fades on its own. The letter stays where it is, preserved as a monument to your better judgment. Your drawer also holds oddities. A pebble that once weighed down a note for a rooftop rendezvous. A scrap of silk from a sleeve you no longer wear. And a tiny piece of folded paper with a single character on it. Mu, the nothingness. You wrote it once during a long winter of Sunts, when letters came from no one and the ink felt heavier than your armor. There's also a small, narrow ledger. It contains nothing practical. No accounts, no inventories. Just short observations, fragments of overheard conversation, half-born haiku. Some are legible, some are cryptic enough that you now wonder what mood you were in when you wrote them. One reads, "The moon is a button, who unfastened it?" And that's either genius or hunger. And let's not forget the ink stains themselves, ghostly fingerprints across the drawer's interior, little smudges where the brush met skin before the page. It's a quiet mess. A personal one, and it stays hidden except on days like this, when organizing is a form of meditation. You pause to arrange the brushes again, aligning them by size. You refill the water dropper. You even rub a fresh pebble of ink on the stone just to watch the black pigment bloom like a cloud forming from bone. The act of tidying here is slower, almost reverent. Clothing and weapons might signal readiness, but this drawer reflects clarity, or at least the hope of it. As you slide the drawer shut, a single hair from the brush escapes and curls at your fingertips. You pluck it free, unsure whether to discard it or keep it as a reminder that nothing, not even your tools, stays perfect forever. You opt to keep it. It joins the pebble and the folded mu, a new relic in your archive of the nearly invisible. Outside, someone calls your name. You answer with a quiet hi, then take one last look at your ink drawer. Tomorrow you'll smudge it again. That's the point. You rise slowly, knees whispering their descent, and move toward the far side of the room. Here sits the largest and most physically demanding storage structure in your home, the armor chest. It dominates its corner like a silent guard, square and squat, made of lacquered wood darkened over years of polish and sweat. The metal accents gleam with soft defiance, edges burnished not by show but by use. Lifting the lid is a ceremony unto itself. You grip the thick rope handles, inhaling the scent of camphor, leather, and the faint iron ghost of battles not fought recently but remembered. This is the storage of consequence. Unlike your clothing or ink, the armor doesn't merely represent a task. It represents identity. It is not you. But it becomes you, in motion, in ceremony, in memory. The cuirass lies folded, its plates stacked like dragon scales. You run your fingers along the lacing, navy blue silk fraying slightly, still strong. Beneath it, your sleeves, shoulder guards, thigh guards, all named, all placed just so. To disturb this order without reason would feel like waking a tiger. Historians still argue whether samurai armor was more symbolic than functional by the late Edo period. And yet here it is, heavy with history and very capable of deflecting both blade and rain if need be. You once stood beneath a cherry tree during a spring storm while wearing this very set. The petals clung to the iron like blessings or apologies. Atop the inner lid of the chest sits your mempo, the face mask. It's lacquered a deep crimson with a faint mustache etched above the lips. You always thought it looked slightly amused, which suits you better than menace. Your father's mask was snarling. You chose not to inherit that part. Next to the mempo, wrapped in a faded cloth, is your helmet. A domed kabuto with antler-like crests, far more decorative than needed but inherited and thus non-negotiable. You used to joke that it added 6 inches to your height and none to your wisdom. Still, you clean it weekly, not for readiness, for respect. Beneath the armor layers are your shitage, the padded undergarments. These absorb most of the wear, both from the armor and from your own nerves. You used to rotate 3 sets. Now 2 suffice. One bears a stitched repair on the side where a sword once slipped past your guard. You keep it anyway. The scar it mirrors has faded. The fabric endures. On the side of the chest, nestled in a small inner compartment, are your tasuki, sashes used to tie up your sleeves. They're bright, dyed in saffron and indigo, gifts from your younger sister long ago. You rarely wear them in battle now, but when the festival drummers come through town, you sometimes tie them on just to feel the past tug at your elbows. There's also a wooden box, smooth with age, holding spare armor fittings, buckles, cords, and lacquer patches. These are your fail-safes, your just-in-case. One brass clasp is shaped like a crane, ornate, slightly ridiculous, and clearly not from your set. You don't know where it came from. You keep it anyway. Possibly cursed, definitely charming. Tucked between 2 greaves is something less martial, a folded paper charm, worn at the edges, blessed at a temple you visited during a strange fevered week of your youth. You were 17, convinced the gods were either angry or ignoring you. You carried the charm into a mock duel later that month and won, barely. You never attributed it to skill. Superstition is safer than pride. You gently lift the sewed shoulder plates and admire how they still catch the light even in the dusky room. The threads that bind the scales together were replaced 3 years ago by hand. You remember pricking your fingers repeatedly. You remember swearing at each knot. You also remember the silence that settled after the work was done. The same silence that rests in the armor now, like a breath waiting to be released. At the very bottom of the chest is a cloth roll you almost forget to check. Inside are 3 slender tools, an oil brush, a polishing cloth, and a small jar of maintenance wax. These are your quiet companions, your conversation with time. You sit back on your heels and begin the gentle rhythm of brushing down a shin guard. Not because it's dirty, but because it deserves attention. Some say polishing armor is a meditative act. Others say it's delusional, a way to pretend control over chaos. You say nothing. You just polish. Your hand pauses over the left gauntlet, where a tiny notch marks the edge, an imperfection from a real fight long ago. You once considered having it repaired. Now, it's a reminder that things survive by being slightly broken. You set the pieces back into the chest one by one like puzzle parts returning to rest. You tighten the cord, smooth the cloth, lower the lid. The weight of it seals the ritual, a quiet clunk like a final period at the end of a sentence. Your armor sleeps again, not discarded, not displayed. Just resting as you do between storms. You rise with a grunt that feels older than your bones and shuffle to the next corner of your storage space. A lacquered cabinet with sliding doors that creak in protest. This is the domain of your tools, not weapons tools. The distinction matters. Any fool can swing a sword, but to maintain a sword, to mend a saddle, to stitch a sleeve or plane a wooden beam smooth, that's discipline. The cabinet is arranged vertically, each shelf home to implements of quiet necessity. The topmost holds your grooming items. Yes, even samurai must trim their nails. A slender box contains clippers, tweezers, a comb carved from camphor wood, and a small mirror so slightly polished it reflects mostly shame. You use it anyway. Your top knot doesn't style itself. One shelf lower and the gear turns practical. Whetstones, folded cloths, and a bone-handled awl for leather work. You pick up the awl, twirl it between your fingers, and remember a time you used it to repair your saddle in a rainstorm. Not ideal conditions. The result still squeaks when you ride, like an old man complaining at every jolt. You never bothered to fix the squeak. It's like company. Historians still argue whether samurai households emphasize self-sufficiency as a virtue or a necessity born from reduced stipends and increased ceremonial expectations. Either way, here you are, grinding your own blade edges because no one else is going to do it right. On the bottom shelf lies a folded cloth roll tied in red string. You untie it carefully. Inside is your calligraphy set. Brushes, inkstone, ink stick, a small water dish. The brush tips are shaped like the claws of resting birds. You haven't practiced in days. Maybe tonight if your hand stops shaking. There's also a wax-sealed pouch of paper, some plain, some with faint gold speckling. Stationery is expensive. You reuse what you can. One sheet already bears the faint outline of an abandoned poem. You meant to rewrite it. You never did. That was a long winter. Resting behind the ink tools is your stamp, a simple wooden block carved with your family crest. A wheel of arrows, each fletched differently, circling inward. Your father said it symbolized unity. You always thought it looked like someone trying too hard to seem organized. Beside the crest is a wrapped bundle of spare cords, toggles, and buttons. Some are for clothing, others are decorative, meant to attach pouches or talismans. One button has a tiny crane carved into it, probably from the same odd brass crane on your armor clasp. A pattern is emerging, possibly haunting. In a small lidded dish, you keep spare wax and oil, not for your armor, for wood, for leather, for quiet repairs. One tinier dish holds dried ink flakes crushed carefully when your stick got too small to hold. Waste nothing, not even art. Your hand reaches toward a wooden spool of thread, dyed a dusty red. You used this color once to repair a tear in your travel cloak. Now that red line crosses your shoulder like a secret scar, always visible, rarely noticed. You call it your thread of fate. You're being dramatic, of course, but only slightly. And then there's the drawer beneath it all, nearly hidden, where you keep the tools you don't like admitting you need. A small knife for paring wood, a needle for splinters, a flask with medicinal sake, a cloth pouch of coin. Not much. Enough. Enough to disappear for a few days should that ever become necessary. You don't plan to use it, but you also didn't plan to be slashing mold off dried rice with a belt knife last month, so here we are. A folded fan sits beside the flask, papered in indigo with white brush strokes like wind. You once used it in a duel, not to fight, but to signal surrender. That opponent had better form, you had better timing, you both walked away. That's the best kind of win. Tucked behind the tools is something far older, a strip of painted fabric worn so smooth the pattern's nearly gone. It's from your childhood, from your mother's obi. You don't know why you keep it, only that whenever you move it, the cabinet smells like cedar and summer. You close the drawer softly, like tucking a memory back to bed. You stand again, stretch, and glance back at your work. The cabinet is still full of chaos, but it's attended chaos. Each thing has a place, a rhythm, a reason. This isn't glory, this is upkeep, the business of being ready for life, not just for death. The sword may sleep in its rack, but these tools, these work every day, sometimes on cloth, sometimes on conscience. You touch the comb once more. Realize your hair needs tying again, maybe later. Right now, the tea water should be warm. You hear it clicking softly in the kettle. That will come next. Another tool, another ritual. But before that, a pause. Just long enough to be still. You make your way across the room to a squat chest near the door. Hinged, iron-banded, worn smooth where your palm rests out of habit. It's a travel chest, though you haven't traveled in months, maybe years. Inside, the past lingers like folded smoke. The lid creaks open with the sound of 10,000 old thoughts. You breathe in dust and dried sandalwood. Not unpleasant, just persistent. You kneel and begin to unpack it piece by piece. First, the layered traveling kimono, not as elegant as your ceremonial robes, but more forgiving. The outer coat, once a deep pine green, has faded with use to something like swamp moss. You still like it. It doesn't argue with the dirt. Tucked inside its folds is a pair of sturdy straw sandals. Waraji. They still carry the ghost of mud from a town near Edo. The one with the terrible noodles and suspiciously friendly cats. You smile at the memory, and then frown at the worn heel straps. They'll need repair. Again, beneath the kimono lies a cloth wrap containing coins, ink sticks, and spare writing brushes, because even on the road, a samurai is expected to write letters with perfect kanji and unbearable poetry. Your last travel poem involved a cracked bowl, an unlucky crow, and a cup of bitter tea. It was not well received. Historians still argue whether samurai travel gear was standardized or personalized. Some say it followed rigid conventions. Others believe it reflected the idiosyncrasies of each warrior. Yours is definitely the latter. For instance, the small stone turtle you keep wrapped in cloth. No one else you know carries one. It's carved from jade, worn smooth and entirely useless in combat. But you found it on the road once, beside a shrine, and for reasons unclear even to yourself, you've carried it ever since. It feels like patience in your palm. Underneath the turtle, you find your folding screen, a travel-sized privacy divider. Less than shoulder height, painted with crashing waves and a sun that never quite sets. You've used it to change clothes, to nap behind, once even as a windbreak when caught in a storm. It's held together by hope and two mismatched hinges. Tucked beside it, your travel teacup. It's small, unglazed, and chipped on one rim. It's seen roadside inns, field clearings, and once the floor of a very surprised noble's carriage when you were jostled by a runaway ox. That day, tea tasted like embarrassment. You pull out a bundle wrapped in oilcloth, your repair kit, needles, twine, thread, a curved awl, a tiny knife with a haft of deer antler. You've sewn rips in everything from your sleeve to a stranger's dog harness. You don't like needles, but you've made peace with them. They do their job quietly. There's also a set of paper charms, faded, water-damaged, blessed in a temple whose name you've forgotten. You were meant to replace them every season. You haven't. They still smell faintly of incense and cheap hope. You smooth them flat again and put them back. Better to carry quiet luck than none at all. A folded waxed sheet contains correspondence from months past. Some from acquaintances, one from your sister asking whether you plan to marry or simply adopt another plant. You've done neither. A pressed maple leaf flutters out. You tuck it back inside. Autumn always leaves a mark. You find your flint and steel wrapped in soft leather, worn smooth by use. You've started fires with this on clear nights and in rainy dread. You always forget how loud the spark sounds in silence, like defiance in miniature. At the very bottom lies a strange bundle of cloth. You hesitate before unwrapping it. Inside, an old sash frayed at the edges. It belonged to someone who's no longer alive. A friend, a rival, both. You keep it because they can't. It smells of old smoke and something sadder. You touch it only for a moment, then fold it tightly again and return it to the chest. Your hand lingers on the last item, a pouch of medicinal herbs. Dried ginger, bitter root, and that one terrible plant whose name you can't remember but which clears your head like getting slapped by the wind. You haven't used it in a while, but you will, eventually. Historians still argue whether samurai prepared for travel more like soldiers or poets. You suspect the answer is both. You prepare not just for distance but for solitude. not just for danger but for silence. You begin placing everything back, one item at a time. Each has its story, each has its place. When you close the chest, it's not just full of things, it's full of versions of you. The traveler, the writer, the tea drinker, the reluctant needle user, the collector of useless jade turtles and necessary memories. You stand again slowly, knees crackle like old rice paper. You are still here, still whole mostly, still ready to go should the road ever call again, but for now the chest stays closed. You return to the storage nook and tug open the smallest drawer in the whole ensemble. A drawer so stubborn it's earned its own nickname in your mind, the Grumbler. Inside, nestled between splinters and lint, are the quietest tools of a samurai's daily ritual. Maintenance supplies. Start with the sword cloths. 2, to be precise. One soft flannel for cleaning, the other silk-lined for oiling. The one with the blue stitching is older, frayed at the corners but loyal. It remembers each careful pass along a blade still warm from sunlight. You lift it, press it between your fingers. There's comfort in how it folds on instinct. Next is the choji oil, a small glass vial tucked into a carved wooden sleeve, its stopper sealed with wax. When opened, it releases a scent of cloves and preservation. Both slightly spicy, slightly sacred. This oil's job is to prevent rust, but it does more than that. It's tradition in liquid form. You apply it not because the blade demands it, but because your grandfather did, and his before him. Beside the vial is the uchiko ball, powdered whetstone wrapped in fine silk like a snowflake packed by monks. One tap, one puff, and the dust clings to the blade. You wipe it away slowly, like removing sleep from the eyes of something ancient and dangerous. Historians still argue whether sword maintenance was primarily a martial duty or a spiritual act. Most likely it was both. You certainly treat it as a kind of meditation. The quiet minutes spent removing oil, applying powder, watching the metal gleam as though exhaling. Those are moments of stillness, of control in a world that rarely offers either. You pull out a small wooden wedge, a makugi. This humble peg holds blade to hilt, soul to body. Without it, a katana is just a loose promise. You have spares, of course, each carved to slightly different thicknesses, stored in a cloth roll tied with braided twine. Then there are the cloths for the hilt, soft and worn smooth from long use. You clean the tsuka as if it's your own wrist. That's where it rests in battle, after all. Every wrap of the ito must sit snug, every diamond pattern aligned, a quiet language of tension and release. Tucked deeper still is a lacquered container the size of a peach. Inside, metal pins, tiny brushes, a fragment of deer antler for polishing the guard. Even a bit of wax for the scabbard mouth, which you rub in slow circles like polishing a memory. You pause and study a hairline crack near the saya's base. It's not deep, but it wasn't there before. You run your thumb along it. This is the paradox of care. Preservation is still decay on a longer timeline, but you do your best. You always do your best. On a shelf above, there's a folded letter, not sealed. The paper is creased, the ink faded to a polite gray. It's a letter of instruction, written by your first sword master. Part lecture, part scolding, part love letter to discipline. You've read it dozens of times and still your favorite line is near the end. The sword is not for the hand, but for the spine. You think about that as you check the alignment of the blade. The slightest wobble would mean something is loose, unsteady, vulnerable. You correct it. A small ceramic pot waits near the back of the drawer. Inside, crushed charcoal and rice flour. You use it to polish the habaki, the metal collar at the blade's base. It gleams now, catching the light like the pause before a spoken vow. You wonder sometimes if the blade knows it's being cared for, if the steel remembers the touch of your cloth, or if that's just another fantasy we project onto objects that outlive us. There's a story among your clan about a blade that would not dull even after 100 battles. Some say it was forged by a smith who spoke only to wolves. Others say the samurai who owned it never struck a single blow, that its sharpness was fear, not metal. Historians still argue whether the story is allegory or artifact. You suspect both. Like most samurai stories, truth tends to wear several masks. You close the drawer softly and sit cross-legged beside your blade. It rests in its scabbard across your lap like a calm animal. You begin the motions, wipe, tap, dust, oil. Your hands move with slow grace, no rush, no music, but the soft rasp of cloth on steel. It takes nearly an hour to finish the full cycle. But when you're done, the sword looks satisfied, as if it knows it's been seen, honored. You return it to its stand with a reverent bow of your head, not for the blade necessarily, but for the ritual, for the time, for the illusion that order can be kept. You blow out the oil lamp and sit in the dim. The scent of cloves, steel, and old cloth wraps around you like an old song. Somewhere outside, a nightbird cries once, then falls silent. You exhale. Even maintenance can be poetry. You wake the next morning to the soft creak of floorboards and the whistle of a kettle in the next room. Tea first, always. Before armor, before orders. You rise, stretch, and reach for your underlayers, thin, breathable linen garments that serve as the first buffer between you and the weight of tradition. They're folded precisely where you left them, edge to edge, corners sharp enough to rival a reprimand. This isn't just habit, it's practice. Folding is a skill you learn young. It's quiet discipline, the kind that separates someone who wears a sword from someone who earns it. Your linen underrobe rustles as you shake it out. Pale gray, soft from dozens of washes patched at the elbow with a different weave. An imperfection you find oddly comforting. You slip it over your shoulders, tying the inner sash with practiced ease. It doesn't need to be beautiful. It just needs to be yours. Next comes the kosode, a hip-length robe that once doubled as everyday wear, but now plays understudy to the more formal layers. This one is deep indigo, lined in cotton with a slight tear under the left arm that you keep forgetting to mend. The sleeves flap as you move. You like the sound. Historians still argue whether kosode colors were strictly regulated by class or simply influenced by personal taste. Some sources suggest samurai were required to dress modestly. Others say the subtle flamboyance was tolerated so long as it didn't outshine your blade. Either way, you've always favored color that speaks softly. You reach for the hakama next, the pleated trousers that make you feel like you're unfolding dignity itself. 7 pleats, each said to represent a virtue. Ji, rectitude. Yu, courage. Jin, benevolence. Rei, respect. Makoto, honesty. Meiyo, honor. And Chugi, loyalty. Whether or not that's historical fact, the symbolism is sticky, like rice in summer. You step into the hakama slowly, one leg at a time, pulling the folds into place like arranging thoughts. The waist ties crisscross in the back, then knot firmly in front just below the ribs. You test the tightness by breathing in deeply. Perfect. The fabric hums when you walk. Now you open the lacquered chest where your kimono is stored. This one is ceremonial, used only for formal visits, rare rituals, or the occasional poetry duel that escalates. It's not today's choice, but you let your fingers brush the silk sleeve anyway. Dark plum embroidered with cranes. Your mother's needlework. It smells faintly of incense and mulberry. Instead, you select your workaday haori, a jacket of tough weave hemp dyed brown by tea leaves and reinforced at the shoulder seams. The hem bears your family crest, a faded mon, hand-painted and slightly asymmetrical. You've debated redoing it, but there's something sincere in its wobble. You slip it on. Over it, you attach the armor vest. Lightweight, lacquered scales sewn into padded silk. Not the full kabuto and cuirass. Just enough protection to say, I'm not looking for trouble, but I'll recognize it. The ties snap into place with soft clicks like the closing of promises. You check the mirror, not a glass one, but a polished copper plate. Your reflection is vague, warm-toned, softened like memory. You adjust your hair, draw it into a top knot with a wooden pin, and blink at yourself. Do you look like a samurai, or like someone trying not to disappoint one? You glance toward the corner shelf where a set of tabi rests, split-toe socks, white but slightly gray from wear. You slide them on, and then the waraji, straw sandals that feel like honesty underfoot. By the door is the final step, 2 sheaths, one long, one short, katana and wakizashi. You bow your head as you lift them, not because they're sacred, but because they're serious. Tools of power, extensions of your will. You thread them through your obi sash, left side, edge up. Always edge up. You shift your hips, feel the weight settle. Historians debate whether samurai dressed themselves or were helped by retainers. Truth is, it depends. Rank, time, urgency. But for you, solitude is part of the armor. You open the shoji screen and step into morning light. The air smells of cedar and hot stones. A bird chirps with the kind of optimism you can't quite trust. You close the screen behind you, aware that you've just completed an hour of preparation for a day that may involve no combat, no ceremony, just walking, watching, waiting. And yet you feel ready. There's a comfort in the uniformity of this ritual. In a world where everything shifts, lords fall, alliances wobble, rice spoils, your layers remain steady. Fabric over skin, weapon against bone, breath behind blade. You walk past your garden, tiny but tidy. The plum tree you planted last year has a single bloom, pale and shy. You nod to it. One petal falls, lands on your sleeve. You brush it off gently. Nothing should cling too tightly. At the gate, a neighbor bows. You return the gesture. Your sleeves rustle like a whispered haiku. You step into the street, and the day begins. Your sandals thump softly against the packed earth as you walk. The weight of your twin swords, a constant reminder at your hip. Not heavy exactly, but present. Like the memory of a conversation you never finished. The sky stretches pale above the rooftops, a wash of watercolor blue interrupted by crow silhouettes and the odd paper lantern left out from the night before. You pass stalls just beginning to stir, merchants lifting shutters with groans that echo your own. The vegetable seller sweeps his front mat, eyes still heavy. A fishmonger flips a sign revealing painted kanji that reads fresh enough. You nod to them both. They nod back. No words, just the acknowledgement of shared mornings and the silent agreement to survive another one. You're not headed anywhere special, just walking your district like many samurai of mid-tier status did in peaceful times. No war to wage, no duel scheduled. Your peacekeeping by presence. The armor you wear, mostly ceremonial now. The sword, a symbol, and yet everyone notices when you pass, because symbols in this city still slice. As you stroll, you mentally catalog your surroundings, that crack in the wellstone, wider than last week. The boy with the ink-stained sleeves, he's been practicing his calligraphy or at least spilling more. The woman with the orange parasol, she never shops on Mondays. Something has shifted in her rhythm. Historians still argue whether samurai policing roles were official or informal. Some claim it was community guardianship born of hierarchy. Others say it was just a convenient excuse to walk with purpose while avoiding paperwork. Either way, your eyes notice everything. It's a habit honed not by violence but by boredom. You stop by a tea house, nodding to the owner. She hands you a rice cracker without asking. It's flavored with seaweed and humility. You chew slowly. Crumbs catch in your hori's folds, but you brush them away with indifference. The wind picks up, carrying the scent of miso and rain. At the edge of the district, you pause at a narrow alley lined with laundry and gossip. Two women glance your way and lower their voices. You hear only fragments, something about a stolen comb, a suspicious traveler. You make a note to wander back through here later, less conspicuously. Sometimes problems announce themselves. Other times they wait to be stepped on. A cat streaks across your path, fur matted, eyes gleaming with disdain. You bow slightly. In this town, even cats have pride. You continue on, passing a storehouse with stacked crates, a shrine with fading paint, and a carpenter carving joints into cedar beams. His knife moves with quiet precision, just like yours once did. Different tools, same craft. He doesn't look up, but he nods. You return it. On your left, a small boy is practicing kata with a wooden sword. His movements are wild, untrained, full of fire. You stop and watch a moment. He notices and freezes, unsure if he's being mocked or evaluated. You offer a small correction, just a hand gesture. His eyes widen with understanding. Then he bows and you walk on. No praise needed. At a crossroads, you rest under the eaves of a bookstore. The owner, an old man with ink-stained fingers and missing teeth, shuffles outside. He waves a fan that does nothing to ease the heat and mutters something about paper beetles. You ask if any new poems have arrived. He snorts, points to a stack bound with twine, and says, "They're still sad." You leaf through a scroll titled "Cicada in the Wind." The first stanza reads, "It chirps, then silence, then memory." You nod, accurate. Tucking the scroll under your arm, you leave a coin behind. It's more than it's worth, but less than he deserves. You both understand this. You resume your route, walking the boundary between presence and intrusion. Your hand rests lightly on your sword, not gripping, just reminding it you're here. A street performer drums on a hollow gourd near the market square. Children chase one another around stalls. A monk feeds rice to the birds, scattering kernels with slow grace. Every so often, someone bows, most don't. Respect here isn't shouted, it's hinted. Like mist in the pines, you pause to drink from a stone basin near a garden wall. The water is cold, metallic, refreshing. It tastes like stillness. Behind you, wind chimes clatter. You listen to their rhythm, reading them like a riddle. 5 notes, 2 silences. Change is coming. As you return toward home, the sun higher now. The streets thrum with life. The vendor who sells pickled plums calls out prices with the volume of someone who hasn't accepted peace yet. A group of students walk past you in a loose gaggle, discussing poetry and tofu with equal fervor. One bows deeply. You smile without showing teeth. Back at your gate, you stop and look up. The wind has shifted. You smell rain on the way. You step inside. Your armor clicks as you remove it. Your swords find their place by the door, angled just so. You remove your sandals, your haori, and finally the sweat-soaked linen at your core. Each piece folded with care. Order is not about neatness, it's about control in a world that offers very little. You sit by the window and watch clouds gather. The tea is bitter this morning. You like it that way. It reminds you you're still here. You wake before dawn. The house creaks like an old friend shifting its weight. A faint rain taps the paper windows, barely enough to wet the ground, but enough to stir the air into something earthy and promising. Today is a changeover day. The armor must be rotated. The seasons aren't just about temperature. They change your posture, your breath, the way cloth moves across your back. And for a samurai, seasons change the very tools you survive with. In the humid suffocation of summer, heavy plate is a prison. In winter, light armor is an invitation to pneumonia and dishonor. You dress accordingly. Your closet, or what counts for one, is a wooden chest and 2 wall racks. Nothing swings open, nothing clicks shut. Everything rests, leans, or folds with the gravity of intent. On one rack, your summer cuirass hangs, lacquered leather with metal slats, light enough for movement, dark enough to hide sweat. On the other, the winter set waits, padded cloth stuffed with mulberry paper thick enough to stop an arrow, or at least convince it to think twice. You begin by laying everything out, not with drama. This is not a performance, but with the quiet reverence of routine. The summer armor, now streaked with salt, bears scratches from practice duels and dents from cart rides through 2 narrow lanes. You wipe it clean with rice paper soaked in vinegar. The scent stings your nose. You sneeze once, and the armor doesn't forgive you. Historians still argue whether samurai rotated gear with the seasons for practical or ceremonial reasons. Was it about climate or mindset? Was it a tactical shift or just another layer of symbolism in a culture that stacked meaning like stones in a river? Maybe it was both, or maybe it was just an excuse to reorganize. You strip the linen padding from the summer plates. It's damp. Of course it is. Your sweat has soaked it through the past month. You set it aside to dry and inspect the ties and cords. Some are frayed. You replace them from a pouch that hangs beside your tea set. Yes, tea and thread. You're a samurai, not a savage. You run your fingers over the painted crest on the chest piece. It's your family's mun, simple, geometric, easy to carve into a helmet or seal into whack. It's the only inheritance you trust. Everything else, the land, the name, the sword could be taken or dishonored, but the mon, that endures. From a separate bundle, you unwrap your winter gear. The padding puffs slightly, eager to breathe again. It smells faintly of dried cedar and ink. The ink is from a note your cousin left inside it last year. Do not forget who wears this. You didn't. You never do. As you hold each piece, you check for more than damage. You listen to how it shifts in your hands. Armor has moods. Sometimes it creaks like it wants to fight. Other times it's silent, waiting. Today it's content to be handled. That's rare. You hang the summer gear in the open-air alcove. Let the wind have it for a while. Maybe it'll dry. Maybe it'll gossip. You let it. The winter set takes its place on the rack. Cuirass, greaves, sleeves, and that strange half-skirt that never sits right unless you're already in a hurry. The cords are soft. You rewound them last winter, threading each one while watching frost form on the roof tiles. You smile, remembering how long that took. Your fingers cramped, your tea went cold, and by the time you finished, the frost had turned to snow, and you had gained a respect for tailors that bordered on the spiritual. You polish the metal inlays with ash paste and a cloth made from worn kimono. It catches the light and bounces it in cold blue shards across the floor. The armor is not beautiful, not in the way a sword or fan might be, but it's loyal. And in your life, loyalty outranks beauty every time. By the time you finish, the sun is up. Not fully, just enough to cast a pale line across the floorboards. You sit back on your heels and stretch. Your knees pop like small drums. You pretend they didn't. You reach for your list. Yes, you keep a list. A samurai's memory is sharp, but not divine. Next to armor rotation is a note. Sandals fix. You shuffle to the door and inspect the pair you wore last week. The straps are tired. The soles whisper of betrayal. You set them aside and bring out the thicker pair. The ones with the patched toe and the sandalwood insert. You slip them on. They still fit, like memories. Outside, the rain has stopped. The street glistens. You take your cleaned armor, hang it properly, and step out. A neighbor bows. You nod. She sees the shift in your attire. She nods again, slower. She knows what it means. You've entered winter, even if the calendar hasn't. A boy walks by with a kite made of old letters. He's laughing, but the letters flutter like ghosts. You wonder if one of them once bore your name. Unlikely. You don't inspire that kind of correspondence. You stop by the shrine and leave a sliver of dried plum on the altar. Not for any god in particular, just the general concept of survival. You whisper thanks. Then, with the morning damp still on your shoulders, you walk toward the dojo. Your winter armor doesn't clink. It sighs. Your fingers know the rhythm before your mind catches up. The cloth wraps around your hand, dipped in oil just thick enough to leave a sheen, not enough to drip. You sit cross-legged before the breastplate as you've done hundreds of times and begin the polishing ritual. Your least violent battle of the day. This is no idle cleaning. This is communion. The armor listens. It remembers. And so do you. First, the iron fittings, blades that no longer cut, edges dulled by time but still defiant. You run the cloth across them in slow circles. Not because it makes them cleaner, but because it makes you calmer. The way monks trace sutras or gardeners trace sand. The mind drifts. The hands stay loyal. The lacquer work, rich and dark like dried blood or black tea, takes longer. It holds onto dust like a jealous lover. You coax it free, section by section, each plate gleaming under your care. It's strange how armor designed for war becomes your most peaceful companion. You hum as you go, a slow tune, nameless, older than you. Your father hummed it. You're sure his father did too. The melody passed down not through instruction, but through muscle memory, like sword forms or grief. Historians still argue whether polishing one's armor was truly a meditative rite, or just a chore romanticized by later generations. But sitting here, cloth in hand, lost in repetition, you're inclined to believe the poets over the skeptics. Beside you, a small bowl of ash paste waits, a mixture of rice husk, pine soot, and a secret ingredient you'll never tell. Not even your apprentice knows it yet. You dab the cloth, apply it gently, and the shine comes slowly, never all at once. Like trust, you pause to admire a reflection. It's not yours. It's the room behind you, warped and smoky in the curve of the metal. You look like a ghost, and you suppose that's fitting. Every samurai becomes one eventually. You shift to the helmet next, the kabuto. Always a challenge. Not just the curves, but the crests. Your mon sits there like a judgmental ancestor. Wipe too hard, and you risk wearing it down. Too soft, and you leave grime in the lines. You find the balance, you always do. You recall when you first polished this helm, shaking hands, a new appointment, fear disguised as reverence. You didn't know what half the rivets were for. Now you could reassemble it in the dark. You have. Twice. The joke, of course, is that armor was rarely this clean in battle. It muddied fast, and bloodstains weren't always yours. But here, in the safety of a quiet evening, you polish as if purity were protection. A knock sounds at the sliding door. You don't flinch. Your apprentice enters, quiet as mist, and sits beside you. He mimics your movements. His cloth makes a different sound, hesitant. The armor he's tending isn't his. Not yet. It's a loner. But one day the responsibility will be his alone. You glance sideways. He's missed a ridge on the shoulder plate. You say nothing. Let him find it. He does a moment later. He smiles proud. You smile too, hidden behind the curve of your helm. This is how you were taught, not with shouts, not with diagrams, with presence, with practice. You whisper, 15 strokes per plate. He nods, he forgets, he'll remember. Maybe not today, but someday when his own student sits beside him and forgets the same thing. The candle burns low. The light hits the armor at an angle that makes it seem alive. Shadows stretch across the floor, broken only by the occasional glint of metal. The room smells of oil, ash, and discipline. You stand, stretch, and shake out your hands. The cloth drops into the basin like a spent leaf. You rotate your shoulder, sore from the repetition, and whisper a quiet mantra. Not for war, for readiness. The apprentice bows. You nod once, then turn and place the armor gently back onto the rack. It shines now. Not gaudy, not mirror bright. Just enough to show that someone cares, that someone's watching. You close the lid on the polishing box and tuck it under the platform. Your knees crack as you rise. You choose not to comment. Your apprentice does the same. A silent pact of aging joints and shared pride. Outside, the wind stirs again. You listen, not for enemies, just for affirmation. The world is still turning. The armor is ready. So are you. You blow out the candle. The smoke curls like a dragon's sigh. The room is dim now, but not dark. The paper screens glow faintly with borrowed moonlight, and you move by memory, not sight. You slide the armor box back into its niche and sit once again. Not to polish this time, but to fold. Your garments lie in a neat stack nearby, as they always do. Inner kimono, undergarment wrap, leggings, tabis, carefully placed. You begin with the base layer, the one that rests closest to your skin, the one that soaks the most of your sweat and the least of your glory. The cloth is soft from years of use, not threadbare, but definitely familiar. You fold along the same creases every time. It's not superstition exactly, but why tempt fate? Fold wrong and something might go wrong in the duel, or in the garden. You chuckle. Sometimes the two feel equally dangerous. You smooth the fabric with your palms, not just to keep it tidy, but to check for tears. Even a small snag can betray you in motion. You learned that the hard way once when a cautum almost cost you a match. Your opponent bowed after, said nothing, but you saw the flicker of awareness in their eyes. They'd seen it. Next time you wouldn't be so lucky. Historians still argue whether samurai took such meticulous care of their civilian clothing, or if this level of ritual folding was reserved solely for battlefield garb. But the lines between war and peace blur easily when your whole life is bound by duty. Next comes the hakama. You lift it gently. It's heavier, thicker, dyed a deep indigo that smells faintly of ash and plum vinegar. You lay it across your lap and begin to pleat it back into form. 7 folds, they say, for 7 virtues. Or maybe it's just a convenient number. Either way, your hands know the order. Front to back, side to center, crease to crease. Your fingers pause at the waist tie. One end is frayed. You trace it thoughtfully. You'll mend it tomorrow. For now, you double knot the ends and roll it with a precision that makes your apprentice's eyes widen. He tries to mimic it, fumbling with his own trousers in the corner. You're rolling a scroll, not strangling it. You tease. He laughs, sheepish. You beckon him over, guide his hands once, then let him try again. It's better this time. Still a little crooked, but improving. Progress. Next is the uwagi, the overjacket. This one bears your family crest, stitched in pale gray thread at the back. It's the only visible sign of your lineage when you're dressed down. You fold it slowly, reverently, as if bowing to an elder. Because in a way you are. Every piece has its rhythm, its place not just in the drawer, but in your memory. You've packed this set for campaigns, for ceremonies, for funerals. It has been with you through mud, blood, tea, and tears. Folding it is like talking to an old friend, familiar, wordless, forgiving. You place the final garment atop the stack, adjust the edges, and wrap the whole bundle in a square of rice starch cloth. It ties shut like a secret. You nestle it into the drawer with the care of setting down a child. Across the room, your apprentice has finished his stack. It's not perfect, but it's his. You nod once. He beams. That moment of silent recognition. That's the true lesson. You could give him books, speeches, drills, but a nod carries more weight than a scroll. Somewhere outside, a rooster crows too early. You sigh. Morning approaches. Sleep might come, or it might not. But the folding is done, and with it, a part of your mind settles. You stretch again. Your spine clicks like bamboo in the wind, and pull the sleeping mat from its corner. It's thin, a bit lumpy, but it smells like cedar. You lay it out beside the armor rack, not for protection, just proximity. You sleep better when it's near. The final task of the night is small but important. You reach under the pillow and retrieve a cloth pouch, your emergency kit. A sewing needle, thread, a sliver of soap, a dried plum. Some habits never die. Some you pass down. You place the pouch beneath your folded hakama. It'll be there tomorrow, just in case, always just in case. You lie back and stare at the ceiling beams. They creak in the night wind, the kind of sound that would unsettle a guest but soothes you instead. This roof has held through storms and snow, like your clothing, like you. Your eyes grow heavy, not from exhaustion, but from completion. Everything is where it should be. The armor is clean. The clothes are folded. The apprentice is learning. The night is still. You exhale slowly. If a samurai is defined by readiness, then tonight you are exactly that. Ready for dreams, ready for dawn, ready for whatever foolish thing the world will throw at you next. You don't smile, but you don't need to. The first light of dawn hasn't cracked the horizon yet, but you stir anyway. Not from a noise, but from the quiet. The kind of hush that only arrives when the rest of the world is still deciding whether to wake or not. Your back complains as you sit up. The mat wasn't soft, but it was familiar. You fold it with a practiced hand and slide it back into its place beside the armor. The room doesn't look different, but the air has changed. Fresher, cooler, tinged with that just before dawn calm that carries a faint promise of clarity. You rise, stretch, and glance at your apprentice. He's curled beneath a blanket, hair mussed, mouth slightly open. You let him sleep. Today won't be gentle. Instead, you tiptoe around the room, rechecking your gear. Not the armor this time, but the travel pack. You have a delivery to make. Just a scroll folded and sealed, but its destination lies beyond the village and halfway up the side of a mountain temple. Not glamorous, but important. And important things you've learned often wear plain clothes. You tie your outer robe, slip on your sandals, and kneel before the tiny altar tucked into the room's far corner. A stick of incense, a quiet bow, a whisper you don't speak aloud. Whether it's to ancestors, gods, or your future self, you're not sure anymore. But the ritual matters. Historians still argue whether samurai actually perform mourning rites daily or whether such depictions are just romantic invention. But you do, every day. Because if you don't mark the beginning, the day tends to unravel like an untied sash. By the time the apprentice stirs, the tea is already steeping. You don't call out. The smell will wake him. It always does. You folded well, you say without turning. He pads over, rubbing his eyes. I think I got the sleeves backwards, he admits. You shrug. Better to confuse sleeves than swords. He snorts at that, and you let the silence stretch while you sip. The room glows faintly now. No fire, just morning pushing at the edges. You pack the scroll into a cloth tube, tie it to your waist, and nod toward the door. Today you carry the broom, you say. He doesn't argue, just bows and steps out ahead of you. You pause once before following, glancing back at the racks. Everything in place as it should be. The courtyard beyond is still slick with dew, the paving stones like quiet mirrors. You cross them without slipping, which you consider a minor miracle considering the sandals are held together with more hope than stitching. You take the long way around, passing the armor dummy on the porch, giving it a nod like an old sparring partner. It leans slightly to the left, which you've never fixed. A small imperfection to remind you that nothing, and no one, is entirely symmetrical. You reach the road just as the sun begins to edge over the horizon. It doesn't rise with a roar, but with a yawn. Slow, soft, and gently golden. The sky goes from ash gray to blush pink, and for a moment you forget you're carrying anything at all. That's the magic of routines. They build walls around the chaos, give you something to lean against when the world tilts. As you and your apprentice walk, he hums a little tune, out of rhythm, off key, but it fills the air with something light. You glance down at your sleeves, still clean for now. And so you walk, one foot then the other, down a road worn smooth by years of sandals and weather. A road that holds memories in every crack, stories in every bend, and enough silence between steps to let you think. Or not think. You aren't sure what you'll say when you reach the temple. Probably nothing. Just a bow, a handoff, and a walk back. But the folds of your clothing feel crisp, your pack is snug, and your body, despite its aches, moves without resistance. Some say the samurai were all battle and bravado, but you know better. Sometimes the hardest battles are fought with brooms, thread, and the weight of tradition. And sometimes victory looks like a perfectly folded sleeve at sunrise. Good night.